Good afternoon and welcome to Annual Town Meeting Preview. I'm Tim Goddard, Town Moderator. I'm joined by Keith Bergman, the Town Administrator. And for the next half an hour or so, we'll be walking through the town meeting warrant, both the special and the annual town meeting, and giving you a preview of what to expect on Monday, May the 2nd at 7 p.m. at the Littleton Middle School in the K Gymnasium. I hope everyone received in the mail, perhaps over the weekend, a copy of your town meeting report. This contains the full articles, motions, maps, recommendations, and so forth, plain English explanations of what's on the warrant, and fiscal information, as well as the Finance Committee's report. Keith, kudos to you and the staff. Again, this is a very indispensable report if you're going to town meeting, and I think there's a lot of good information in there. I hope you have a chance to review this before
Great. Thanks very much,
meeting.
Tim.
Okay, up on the screen now, you see the details, the particulars of town meeting. It is Monday, May 2nd at the Littleton Middle School K Gymnasium. Our practice is to start the annual town meeting at 7 o'clock and really get as far into the business of the annual town meeting as we can before 7:30 p.m. when we adjourn to the special town meeting. And a special town meeting contains articles that need to be acted upon before the end of the fiscal year sometimes, and we, as I said, we go as far as we can with the annual, and then we take care of the special town meeting, come back to the annual town meeting to continue where we were in progress. And you'll see that we've got, I think it's 7 or 8 articles on the consent calendar. We started this a few years ago, and this is a procedure where we essentially bundle what are deemed to be non-controversial or routine articles that come up year to year. And we take one vote on all of those articles, provided that everyone concurs. If a single person objects to including any of these articles in the consent calendar, they have the opportunity to put a hold on that, and that article comes out of the consent calendar, and it is debated in the normal course of business. But we found it to be a bit of a time saver in that it does contain mostly kind of mundane things that are authorized annually or reauthorized. And you'll see that this list is no exception. There's nothing remotely controversial, we think, in this list. But again, if people have questions or object to any part of it, we don't have a problem doing that as well. But that'll be the first order of business at the town meeting. We've got a kind of a procedural situation that we've been dealing with the Board of Selectmen and who put the warrant together, the town administrator and myself. There are 2 articles that are kind of linked, or inextricably linked, I believe would be one way to put it, regarding the alumni field renovation. There's on the special town meeting article warrant, there's an article to provide design funding for a synthetic turf field. And on the annual town meeting, Article 18, there's a proposed moratorium on the installation of turf fields with so-called crumb rubber or a lead component to the field. I'll give Keith credit for this. He came up with a couple of alternatives. This one seemed to be the cleanest way to go. Do you want to maybe explain that, Keith?
Sure, thanks very much, Tim. The dilemma was to how we could take up 2 articles, one after the other, where one of the articles was in the special town meeting warrant, the other in the annual. So what we've come up with is the idea that for the first half hour of town meeting, we'll work on the annual, and as the moderator said, get as far as we can with the budget. Then at 7:30, which is the appointed hour for the special town meeting to begin, we'll take up all of the articles in that town meeting, with the exception that the alumni field appropriation article would come up at the very end. And that upon completion of that article, we could then move back to the annual town meeting, take out of order the moratorium article, so that we would be voting on one right after the other, and rather than have them be separated by some number of hours. We've also had the request to flip the order, to have the moratorium done first and the appropriation article for Alumni Field done later. Procedurally, we can work that out as well, and we'll make every effort to have that procedure in hand and in place by the time we get to town meeting.
It's still a bit of a fluid situation. The goal is to take them both up in a timely manner. We know a lot of people are coming, specifically for these two items, and we want to be as accommodating as we can. Why don't we take a look at the special town meeting articles first, Keith, even though they'll be coming up after the annual town meeting is started. Some of these are no strangers to special town meetings. Do you want to start with the prior bills?
Sure. We have one bill of a prior year for just a few $100s. We have a number of line item transfers where we're not appropriating additional amounts, but just redistributing a total of about $32,000. We have an article that the school department needs. They had received an insurance settlement in an amount over $20,000, and the statutes direct that it takes a town meeting appropriation to spend any more than $20,000. So that the schools can have access to the $80,000 they received in an insurance settlement, we'll be having town meeting vote to approve their use of those funds. Then we have four articles or four items in an article for capital plan adjustments for fiscal 2016. I'll get into those in a little more detail in a moment. Then recommendations to be implemented for putting additional local monies into the so-called blended community preservation fund. That's something that increases our base for state matching funds. We have a project that has been proposed by the Clean Lakes Committee for a mill pond restoration feasibility study, which we are supporting. And the last item is trust fund grants for two projects that are approved by the trust fund commissioners. So just to go in a little more detail about the capital plan projects, first we're transferring just under $13,000 between items for previously approved projects. We're reducing an amount for police headquarters and increasing the amount for the town offices as recommended by our permanent municipal building committee. Next item is a $25,000 appropriation, which we could use to hire consulting services to help the planning board address some zoning bylaw amendments. We're looking at exploring an inclusionary zoning bylaw, which is one of the measures that was identified in our housing production plan as a way to create affordable units through the regulatory process. And the other is an over 55 housing bylaw to look at maybe we could tweak that. And lastly, a review of the sign bylaw, there was a study that was completed in 2010. We would like to take that study, pick it up off the desk and to take a fresh look at it, and we would need to have some consulting dollars available for it. Next project is there's $530,000 which is requested for a design of the fire station, and then $234,000 and change for a design for Alumni Field. On the fire station project, as I hope folks are aware from all the outreach that's been done over the last few years by Fire Chief Scott Wazinski, I think an excellent case has been made for the need to upgrade our existing fire station to better meet the needs of our fire department. So we're looking at a rebuild, an expansion of the fire station. The capital estimate is $7 million. But before we reach the question of raising money for the construction, we first want to raise the amount needed to do the design. So we're looking at $530,000 at this May's town meeting to do the design, and then we're looking at being able to have the construction funding brought to the November special town meeting this fall. So it would be located at the current site of the fire station at 20 Foster Street, and it would be building on that, expanding on that current site. The other project that we're looking to get design funds for is for renovations to Alumni Field, and the request that's been made by the Board of Selectmen is to seek $234,593 for development of design documents and bid services for renovations to the Alumni Field complex. And this would involve reconstruction of the playing field with the actual surface material to be determined, as well as construction and installation of new bleachers, bathrooms, concession stand, additional parking, and improved traffic flow around the complex. The current estimate for construction costs is about $2.3 million. That sum, if the design is approved at this town meeting, the construction funding amount would be requested at a future meeting. And then just to go through the remaining special town meeting articles, again, this year we're looking to fully implement the so-called Blended Community Preservation Act in Littleton. We were the first community, the first town, I should say, to adopt the blended CPA. Last year, we fully implemented it by adding the maximum amount of money that we're allowed to add. We take our own funds and we put them into the Community Preservation Fund. And by that act of transferring money from general revenues to the Community Preservation Fund, we qualify for additional state matching funds. So we saw our match go up from $68,000 a year ago to $267,000 a year later, still with just the 1% surcharge from on the property tax for the community preservation surcharge, but we added an equivalent of another 2%. So what we've seen in recent years is that by adding the additional municipal revenues, we've been able to devote significantly more funds to the Community Preservation Fund for purposes of open space, housing, historic, and active recreation. And that in return, we've received an additional state match over and above what we would have otherwise received. So we've identified funding sources that we can go after. We think we'll have at least 3 years in a row worth of funds. Last year, we fully funded the additional 2% equivalent. It was about $450,000 a year ago. It's $480,000 this year. It'll be close to $500,000 next year. And we've identified funding sources, mitigation funds that we've either received or are about to receive, and funds from the cell towers that are dedicated for open space purposes. We're still using those dedicated funds for the same purpose that they were originally intended, but we're just able to make them, by putting them in the fund, that we can have them available for to receive additional state matching funds. So this year we're looking at putting, out of the total of $484,000, we're looking at putting $266,000 into open space and $72,000 and change apiece into housing, historic, and recreation. We anticipate that if the state matching fund rate is the same this year as it was last year, we might receive close to $300,000 in matching funds. So it's, and I would heartily recommend for any community that has not adopted the blended CPA to do so, because it's a great way of getting additional state funds just by moving the money around.
Absolutely, and the state match seems to be declining year after year, so it's all the more important to be creative and leverage the additional funding.
You bet. Another project to look at is the restoration of Mill Pond, the feasibility study that's been proposed by the Clean Lakes Committee and supported by the Board of Selectmen, that we're looking to commit $67,500 from the cell tower account that's been building up over the years for Clean Lakes projects. Right now there's a balance of $450,000 in that account. I'd like to initially spend $67,500 to do the town share of the feasibility study, which would be conducted by the Army Corps of Engineers. Upon completion of that feasibility study, the determination will be made by the Corps whether the construction project can proceed or not, in which case there's a 65% federal cost share of up to $2 million. So it would be worth it if we can proceed to be able to grab that $2 million in federal funding. The town's share, if we did proceed with implementing the project, would be about $1 million, which we could borrow over 15 years and then pay with the Clean Lake cell tower funds. So we'll be using those funds. We won't be using property taxes in order to get the project done, which we're pleased with.
Very good. I think that...
So on to the annual.
On to the annual town meeting warrant. And by the time we get back to the annual, hopefully we'll be through the operating budget, perhaps. As I mentioned before, the consent calendar is the first item we take up, and we deal with 7 or so articles that way. The way the warrant's organized by the selectmen, the financial articles come after the consent calendar. Any supermajority articles, those that require a 2/3 vote, follow the financial matters, and then everything else that doesn't fit one of those categories comes into play. So why don't we take a look at the financial articles, Keith? The big one, of course, Article 4 is the operating budget.
Right. This is, for starters, this is a list of all of the financial articles that we'll be going through. They're the ones that you typically see year after year: the operating budget, the enterprise funds, capital items, the community preservation budget, personnel bylaw amendments, and then we've also got 3 stabilization funds that we'll be acting on. So for the next article, we have the fiscal year 2017 operating budget, and we're pleased to once again this year that the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee and the School Committee have reached an agreement going into town meeting on what our spending plan ought to be. And what those numbers work out to is a total budget recommended in the amount of $41 million. That's a 5.25% increase overall. It includes an additional $750,000 appropriation for the school department, as well as additional amounts needed for the municipal departments, our other assessments, our debt service, and employee and retiree benefits. So we're pleased to have been able to reach agreement on the fiscal 2017 operating budget. So starting with the operating budget, we have an additional amount for each of the departments. Next article is we're going to talk about the capital items. We have projects for the police department, fire department, highway, a number of projects for the schools, library, park and recreation, and then some facility projects. And one of the facility projects to highlight is the $100,000 that we're seeking for the stormwater action plan. I mentioned earlier that we have a balance of $450,000 in the Clean Lakes Fund. Clean Lakes Committee is supportive of our spending $100,000 a year for the next 3 years to address our stormwater needs. That we are one of the communities that is subject to a just issued permit from the Federal Environmental Protection Agency the so-called MS4 permit for small municipal stormwater systems, and the need will exist for the town to come into compliance with that permit. We've estimated that the compliance costs are about $350,000 in the coming year. So we are pleased that we're able to fund those costs from Clean Lake's cell tower funds, which means that we would not have to raise the cost from either the property tax or, as many communities would have to do, from a fee structure. Another project that's in the warrant is $100,000 for the Castle in the Trees playground. That we have a total project cost of $325,000, which has been supplemented with a $100,000 appropriation by the state and a lot of in-kind services and other private fundraising. So the town contribution to this project would be $100,000, which is proposed in this article. Then we have a list of facility needs assessment recommendations that our Permanent Municipal Building Committee has come up with. This year it's $511,000 worth of building projects, which we're working on as listed here. Then one of the usual articles is for the Community Preservation Committee to bring its recommendations forward for open space, historic housing, and recreation projects. So the town meeting warrant contains the list of projects that are being recommended by the committee, and it's worth noting that the fund balances that we would have left over for community preservation purposes are we would have $1.4 million available to us at the end of the project, at the end of the spending plan at town meeting. We're putting funds into the CPA fund in the special town meeting. We're expending funds in the annual town meeting, and our projection is that we'll still have $1.4 million in available fund balances for community preservation projects.
And I think it's important to note, Keith, that the only way community preservation dollars can be spent is if the CPC recommends the projects to town meeting.
That's correct. Yeah, the Community Preservation Committee is the gatekeeper on whether use of those funds can be brought to town meeting or not. So just a few of the financial articles to go through. We are making amendments to the personnel bylaw. We are proposing to implement a 2% salary schedule adjustment for non-union employees, which matches the amounts that all of our union employees got for fiscal year 2017. We're also seeking to implement the new $10 an hour state minimum wage that went into effect this year. Mm-hmm. For a stabilization fund, I mentioned that we're dealing with three. This year we're putting into the regular stabilization fund $101,000, which will bring our fund balance there to $2,055,000. We are adding to the capital stabilization fund $2.5 million to bring that total to $2.9 million, and that sum would be available for capital projects. And then we're establishing this year a new fund, a debt exclusion stabilization fund, which could be used in the future to, if funds are put into this fund, we could defray the principal and interest costs on projects that have been excluded, where the debt has been excluded by ballot question. So in this way, we could actually reduce the cost of the debt that's passed on to property taxpayers by making use of the debt exclusion stabilization fund, which we'll hopefully do in upcoming years. Next, under the category of supermajority articles, we've got, there are three such articles in the warrant. One's being withdrawn, been withdrawn by the Water Commissioners, so we will not be acting on Article 15, cell tower leases. We will, however, be acting on a list of parcels that we seek to add to our tax title abutter lot sales program, and we need town meeting approval for Nagog Hill Road easements. And I can just quickly show you the map of the Narcissus Road. There are two lots at parcels 114 and 113 of Assessor's Map U12, and those qualify under our abutter lot program. They're both under 5,000 square feet and not buildable.
This continues a program that was established a few years ago to offer tax title parcels to abutters.
That's correct. Yeah, where the property is not developed, but we'd prefer to have it in private ownership so that it's of use to the immediate abutter. We've established the program to make such lots available to just the abutters. Then we have an article to approve Nagog Hill Road easements. One of these is for a permanent drainage easement. The other is for a permanent easement for maintenance purposes, and these are both in connection with the ongoing project to improve Nagog Hill Road.
And those articles require the 2/3 supermajority because they involve interest in land.
That's correct.
Okay.
Coming to the finish line here with all other articles, here's Article 18 of the annual is where the voter petition is for the moratorium on installation of synthetic turf with tire, crumb, or lead component. It's a 3-year moratorium proposed for town-owned land. As we discussed earlier in this presentation, that we're looking to have this article come up either immediately before or after the Alumni Field article, sometime in that, I would guess that we'll probably get there by 8 o'clock, 8:15 maybe.
Right. Yeah, one way or
With
another,
luck.
Article 18 will be advanced earlier in the agenda.
Then we have a number of town bylaw or proposals that we're making. One is a routine article which was requested by the Zoning Board of Appeals. Some years ago, Littleton was ahead of the curve in adopting a bylaw requiring fences around swimming pools. Since then, the state building code has been amended to require it, so therefore our local bylaw is superfluous, and it's been suggested that we delete our bylaw since it's now unnecessary. Two other bylaw amendments that we're proposing both have to do with stormwater. One is for an illicit connections and discharges to the stormwater storm drain system. The other is for stormwater management and erosion control. I'll get to those in a moment. And then the last article is a home rule petition to allow additional package store licenses. So on the illicit connections and discharge bylaw, we're looking to pass this bylaw and the next one in order to come into compliance with our 2003 permit as issued by EPA. A new permit just came out for 2016. It will take effect on July 1, 2017. One of the things that EPA is looking at in issuing the new 2016 permit is to what extent is a community in full compliance with its original permit from 2003. In our looking over what that permit required us to do, we see that there are a couple of bylaws that we need to adopt. We had done a lot. We had adopted the low impact design guidance document, which has been used frequently throughout, has been required of developers and others, but we're looking to specifically adopt an illicit connections and discharge bylaw, and we're also looking to adopt a stormwater management and erosion control bylaw. We have information available online, detailed question and answers about the bylaw. We also sent out information in the electric bills to all households. These are long bylaws. What we've done is we've taken the model that is prescribed by EPA and the state, and we have crafted bylaws which seek to have the town of Littleton come into compliance with a permit. For those communities that are not in compliance with the permit, EPA is fully capable of issuing fines and assessments. They did that in recent years to the town of Concord, among others, and we would prefer that they not have to do that for Littleton. So we're looking to come into full compliance with the bylaw by adoption of these two measures. And then the last substantive item in the warrant, it's a home rule petition. We're seeking to obtain state authorization for the selectmen as the local licensing authority to issue 2 more all-alcoholic package store licenses. Under the quota system that exists under state law, a community of Littleton size is only allowed to issue 2 all-alcoholic package store licenses, and we have issued both of those licenses.
That's right, yeah.
So that any additional ones would require state approval, state legislative approval. The proposal that was suggested to the board, which the board has adopted, would say that these 2 package store licenses would be available just for the Littleton Common area, which we're defining the way the zoning bylaw defines the Littleton Village Common District, also known as Area A. So that's what we're saying is the legal definition of Littleton Common for the purposes of this home rule petition. Interestingly, the governor's proposal to allow cities and towns to set their own quotas for liquor licenses only applies to pouring licenses. So if it passes, it will only apply for restaurants and bars, but it would not apply to a license for a package store. So even if that state measure that's part of the municipal modernization bill passes, a community would still need to go this legislative route for additional package store licenses. So we're jumping on that bandwagon.
So this would be two new all-alcoholic package store licenses. So could current licensees with, say, a beer and wine license apply for?
They could upgrade if they are located.
So there wouldn't necessarily be 2 new package stores.
It need not be that it would.
It could be, but it need not
that
be.
we would go through a procedure where the board is making the 2 additional licenses available generally, and we'll go through a process of selecting from among those applying for the 2 limited licenses. We'll go through a procedure to select those that get
Very
the new
good.
licenses, and that's. Since the remaining articles are part of the consent calendar, that we get through that, we'll be all done with town meeting.
That's
this
right.
year.
Whether that's Monday night or Tuesday night, we do not know. It'll all depend, I think, on how the discussion goes on Alumni Field, frankly. But there you have it, the rundown of the town meeting warrant. Once again, I'll remind you to please review your town meeting report, bring it with you to town meeting, make your notes in the margins, and come prepared to ask good questions, although I think, frankly, a lot of questions are answered in advance in the information that's presented. It's a great job done by the town and the staff here. With that, Keith and I will sign off until the next town meeting, or maybe a special town meeting in the fall, when we'll again provide this preview to you. My pleasure working with you, Keith, on this.
Thanks so much, Tim.
Nice job on everything as usual, and we'll see you at town meeting on Monday, May the 2nd, and don't forget the annual town election is the following Saturday, May the 7th. Thank you very much.